Civic engagement is such a huge part of our mission at the San Antonio Report, and we really appreciate your participation in tonight's debate. Now, something interesting about the District 6 race is that it looks a little bit different than the other 4 races on this runoff ballot that we're going to see on June 7th. Each of those races have come down to progressive versus conservative candidates, even though these are nonpartisan races, but not in District 6. In this race, a field of 8 candidates was narrowed by voters to 2 progressives vying to represent a district that most recently elected Melissa Cabello Havrda, the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and before that, Greg Brockhouse, an unabashed conservative. Only 28 votes separated Kellyanne Gonzalez from Rick Galvan on May 3rd, with Gonzalez securing 19.7% of the vote and Galvan securing 19.37% of the district's 8,411 votes. District 6 covers much of San Antonio's inner to far west side, one of the fastest growing parts of San Antonio. It also contains the majority of the city's data centers, plus the much lauded Northwest Vista Community College, the private Hallmark University, and even the Government Canyon State Natural Area, which I just learned last night when I looked it up. Now I'd like to introduce the 2 runoff candidates in this race. Kellyanne Gonzalez is a 34-year-old labor organizer who worked with Councilwoman Havrda last year to amend the city charter so that city employees could participate in local elections, and most recently worked for the union representing City of San Antonio employees. She's also a Democratic precinct chair and the owner of a screen printing business, and she has Cabello Havrda's endorsement in this race. Rick Galvan is a 24-year-old projects manager in the District 5 City Council office and a progressive political organizer whose council campaign has been endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America. He also serves as president of the Pipers Meadow Neighborhood Association. Thank you to both candidates for being here tonight and participating in this important civic engagement event. We're going to kick off tonight's debate with a 1-minute and 30-second opening statement from each candidate. From there, when the moderator asks a question, you'll have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. If I ask a follow-up question, you'll get 1 minute to respond, or if a rebuttal is needed, you'll get 1 minute awarded at my discretion. Quick note for the crowd, this debate is exactly 1 hour, so please don't disrupt, and let's focus on hearing from the candidates. Let's get started with the opening statement from Ms. Gonzalez.
Thank you to everybody that took the time out of their day to be here today. And for those of you watching at home, thank you as well. My name is Kellyanne Gonzalez, proud daughter of District 6. I'm not here to build a resume. I'm here to get results. But first, I'd like to share a little bit about my story. In 2018, I lost my older brother, Coco, to suicide. That deep pain opened my eyes to the inequities that my community faces, and I have been fighting ever since that day to make this city work better for workers. As a labor leader in my community, I led the charge to overturn a 74-year political gag rule on our city employees. That's not a talking point. That's action. Our communities are tired of waiting. While others talk, I've built a campaign that was the top vote getter in the general election, as well as the top fundraiser of grassroots support. That's not just about money. That's about trust and about the belief that I am the right leader for District 6 that can bring about a more prosperous future for our city. I'm not here for politics. I'm here for strong families, safe communities, and stable futures. I have lived our struggles. I have already done the work. I'm ready to do more. I'm ready to put in that hard work. And I am ready to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Galvan, your opening statement.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to TPR and San Antonio Report for hosting tonight and all the folks who are here today. My name is Rick Galvan. I am running for San Antonio City Council, District 6. I was born and raised in District 6 in the Pipers Meadow neighborhood, just outside 410, where I grew up my entire life, and a proud graduate of public schools in the neighborhood, going from Myers Elementary to Jordan, and then to Holmes High School, where I graduated from, and went on to UT Austin to earn my bachelor's degree. My family comes from the inner west side of San Antonio. My mom is a lifelong educator in our city, as well as a public school teacher, a preschool teacher in Northside ISD in District 6. My dad served in the Air Force and then went on to work in civil service at Kelly, at Lackland, and then Randolph Air Force Base. And it's because of his service that we were able to afford the home that I grew up in, where I now serve as Neighbor Association President for the community that I grew up in. It is because of that experience, growing up in the district, serving as a neighborhood leader in District 6, and also working at City Council as a Director of Special Projects for District 5, working to deliver constituent services and policy solutions that really support working families throughout our city, that I'm running for San Antonio City Council, District 6, for my home. And I believe that together we can make sure that our city is a safe, affordable, and quality place to live in as we continue to grow rapidly throughout the city. Thank you.
Let's get started with our first question, which I'm sure you've heard before, but we'd like to hear your answer on this one. Community and economic growth comes with all sorts of positives, but sometimes prosperity for some leaves others behind, particularly when it comes to housing insecurity, rising property taxes, and San Antonio's persistent issues with poverty. What is your plan to promote growth in District 6 without displacing those who are already there? Mr. Galvan, we'll have you take this one first.
Yeah, thank you for the question. You know, currently as a neighborhood president, I've been working a lot with different neighborhood leaders through the West-Northwest planning conversation with the planning department. And what that looks like is looking at ways that we can make sure our city is growing in a comfortable way for all of our folks in our district, really advocating for our neighborhoods to continue to still have the same charm that they have, but also to grow with the times, right? Knowing fully well that we are going to have more than 1 million people by 2040, and so understanding that our city is going to keep on growing, including District 6. We know District 6 is one of the fastest growing districts in the entire city, with the Northwest side taking a lot of the growth even beyond 1604, which is impacting a lot of us in terms of traffic, in terms of public safety, in terms of housing affordability too. And so what those conversations have looked like, and as well as the conversations I've had at the doors, has been really talking about ways that we can make sure that as our city continues to grow, that we leave no neighborhood behind. That instead we focus our priorities and our budget on making sure that our housing continues to stay affordable here for our city. Our utility rates remain affordable as much as they can, as we know we have to expand some of those pieces there, while also making sure that we're investing in workforce development programs, as well as education programs from preschool all the way through college, making sure that our folks are able to access high quality education and workforce development opportunities to really make sure that they can meet the growing job markets in our area, so they are able to actually be able to be hired by these companies that are coming into our city and not be left behind by some of the growth coming in, whether it's downtown or in our district or elsewhere. Those are the key pieces to make sure that our folks are able to really grow together, our neighborhoods are able to really prosper together, is really looking at ways that we can make sure our city continues to be affordable, that our investments in infrastructure go into our communities, and our investments in education and workforce development support our folks that are here now and will be here in the future too.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez.
I have a revolutionary idea for how we can ensure that while we are growing, we are not leaving any neighborhood or any community behind. And it's to listen. As a leader, which is what a city council member is, we need to make sure that we are mitigating any concerns that our neighborhoods and our neighborhood associations have when it comes to that growth. And we need to make sure that we are investing in families first and foremost. San Antonio has had consistent poverty for the last 6 decades that has not gotten better. And so while I applaud several of the measures that our current city council has taken to improve that disparity, to improve that economic and workforce development, the fact of the matter is we still have a lot of work left to do. And so we need to be listening to our neighbors, listening to their concerns, and taking those concerns into accountability when we are talking about the growth of our district. Because yes, District 6 is the fastest growing district in our city. But apart from that, we are also the district that has the most amount of veterans in our city, the most amount of active duty as well. And so, yeah, we need to make sure, as a leader, you need to make sure that you are listening to your neighborhood's concerns and bringing those concerns to the table, making sure that they are actually addressed and that they don't just get lost in a vacuum. And I am ready to be that strong voice for my community, to advocate, to make sure that no neighborhood, no person, no school-age child is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you. District 6 is home to the Nelson W. Wolf Municipal Stadium, the current home of the Missions minor league baseball team, but as we all know by now, the team's ownership has plans to build a new ballpark for the team on the northwest side of downtown. Last month, at the same time the City Council approved creating an entity that will own a planned new ballpark, council members voted unanimously to approve more than $250,000 in improvements to the existing field, like enlarging the visiting locker room, expanding team training areas, relocating storage, and repairing the dugouts. What do you think the future of Wolf Stadium should look like? There's been some discussion of Edgewood ISD taking ownership, and Councilwoman Cabello Havrda has said it's important to ensure that the future of the Edgewood community remains central to these conversations. So how do you plan to make sure the people in your district aren't left behind by this move? Ms. Gonzalez, you first on this one.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we have to accept the reality that the missions leaving Wolf Stadium is going to impact our communities. Several of our families that live around the Mission Stadium work there. Several of their children work there during the summers because the fact of the matter is, SeaWorld is just a little bit too far for us. And so we need to make sure that we are involving the community in any decision about how we move forward with that Nelson Wolf Stadium. And I think part of involving the community into that process is identifying key deficits that we have in that part of the district. And one of those deficits is actually a senior center. We have 2 half-day nutrition centers in the vicinity of the Nelson Wolf Stadium, and I see a great vision for building a complete senior center, just like the one that we have on Culebra, the Trevino Senior Center, that has the WellMed incorporated in there so that our senior citizens have those primary care physicians in the same facility where they are building those friendships, building those relationships. So that's one way that we can look towards the future of Wolf Stadium. But I would also advocate that we look to Brooks Base and look at the amazing economic development that has happened there. I understand that several residents of District 6, specifically the Edgewood community, were not happy with that move, but I counter that and say that we have a real opportunity here to build something for the district that is not going to be able to be moved, something that will actually benefit our families and our communities for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Galvan.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, thinking about what the future holds for that site that was really a gem for our district, right? Thinking about all the folks that would come from across the city, but also in our neighborhoods to really enjoy the kind of experience that was being offered there at the Wolf Stadium, not only on big game days, but other days too, for different community events. And so when talking to folks in the area, we talked a bit about, not only the move, but what that opportunity looks like for the future of this particular site. And what those conversations have kind of brought up, we're talking about, of course, the different inequities in the neighborhood and throughout the area, whether it is a senior center or different community centers, or even also some of the lack of connections to the current park there and the other parks outside of 151 that creates a little bit of a barrier, right? And so one of the big things that I've talked with folks about is really looking at ways, first of all, that our city fully involves everyone in the process, making sure that they come out to the neighborhoods first and include them in a really big vision-making process, not just saying, here are some ideas, what do you think, pick and choose, but rather saying, what elements do you want to see within this area? Understanding that the destination park for District 6 is right next door, how can these two pieces connect to each other? Understanding the trail is nearby too, how can we connect that piece together too, so make sure that there's a more natural connection to all these pieces? Understanding too that 151 and along Old Highway 90 used to be an industrial corridor, and that particular place used to be the Levi Strauss factory building, where we used to have folks who were making clothes here for our folks in our city. And so putting those pieces together, I think, is important to not only look at ways that we can create recreation in the neighborhood that connects to the actual baseball fabric of the area of Old Highway 90 and Callahan, but also looking at ways too beyond that, where we could look at human development and youth development and economic development too, that supports the folks there, doesn't leave anyone behind, and creates a destination that our folks are excited to go to as well.
Thank you. To follow up briefly on that question, and I'll go first to you, Mr. Galvan. There's been plenty of attention paid to the Frost Bank Center and what moving the Spurs would mean for the east side, the arena district. Do you feel like residents who live near the Wolf Stadium have had sufficient opportunity to weigh in on its future?
No, I don't. And, I think something with that was lost in the conversations at council was the fact that just a year before this conversation started happening about Wolf Stadium moving and leaving our District 6, we lost one of our middle schools in the area. Edgewood School District had to close them down on Red Middle School, right on Acme Road. And so understanding that there's this conversations about stadiums and about big, massive projects downtown, and yet not only are we actually leaving this particular place behind, but this place was already left behind, that there was no economic development that really came from this, unfortunately, in the area. Instead, what we saw was that further disinvestment in the area. Yes, it was a nice facility for folks to be able to attend and to enjoy and create memories at, but what did it bring in terms of actual large-scale economic development and human development? Unfortunately, not a whole lot. And so I'm really frustrated that there wasn't more conversations with folks in the area to have that vision-making process about not only can we start saying of what this could be in the future, but what could it be now, too? And so unfortunately, it's already moving forward and it's moving downtown. That'll be a nice thing for downtown to, I think, understand and look at more with the San Pedro Creek Authority. But after that point, it really means looking at a full way with our planning department, our economic development department, historic preservation department, to really identify how can we get more folks involved in this process.
Ms. Gonzalez, the same follow-up question for you. Do you feel like the people who live around the Wolf Stadium had enough input? If not, how should that change?
Yeah, I would agree with Rick that the residents that live around the Nelson Wolff Stadium do not feel like they had enough input, or still do, or that even a conversation is being had about what happens with the future of Nelson Wolff Stadium. And I actually grew up right on Acme Road, right across the street from Wren High School. And so I know that community very well. It is very dear to me, and it is at my forefront when I am thinking about the inequities that District 6 faces and the work that it's going to take to make District 6 a more equitable place to live for all of the residents in District 6. And so, yeah, I would say no, we have not had enough of a voice, but because I come from that part of the district, because it is near and dear to my heart, I am going to make sure that their voice, that their concerns, that their vision for what they want their community to look like is going to be heard, is going to be at the forefront. And that is one of the reasons that I am running. It has been over 20 years since we have elected somebody from the inner 410 part of District 6, and I believe that several of the residents from District 6 and the inner 410 part feel that disconnect. And so I am very proud to be from that part of the district. I am very proud to say that I will be an advocate for that community and that I will make sure that their voice, that their concerns, and that their vision for the future is carried out. Thank you.
Thank you. You both have backgrounds in activism, Ms. Gonzalez as a labor organizer and recently a representative of the union made up of city employees. Mr. Galvan, you've been an organizer for progressive political causes, including addressing gun violence, expanding healthcare access, and strengthening public schools. So I have an interesting question for you. Through those experiences, can you tell a story of a time you saw the city government process work at its best? Take us from a problem to the activism that was necessary, and then tell us about the solution. Either one, whoever's ready to take that one first.
I can go first.
Okay.
Yeah, so my story that I have to share with you all starts in 2023 when I was brought on to the labor union for City of San Antonio employees. And it was a journey to get there. And I was brought on because of my political experience and my organizing experience. And so one of the first things that I did when I was brought on is read every single administrative directive that the city workers have to follow. And let me remind you that violating an administrative directive is grounds for termination within the city. And so when I discovered Administrative Directive 1.2, which was the political prohibition on city employees, I thought, wow, what is this? Why are people being punished, threatened to be fired for expressing their full political voice as far as who they would like to see on their city council seat or as mayor of our city? And so I did a little bit of research, and I found out that political prohibition was actually included in our 1951 city charter. And so the very first thing that we did, because I think, there was a lot of talk of our mayor doing a charter amendment before he left office, we approached the city manager and we approached the mayor and asked them to add removing that political prohibition to the list of charges for the City Charter Review Commission. We were told no. We were told that this was not something that the mayor wanted the City Charter Review Commission to look into. But coming from labor, we did not take no for an answer. And so we organized our members. We taught them how to give public comment on this very important issue and how to advocate for such a historic municipal election, what it meant to have their voice not counted in that conversation. And so we went to every single Charter Review Commission hearing, we gave public comment, and then on the back end, we met with every single individual council member and advocated to them why it was so important for this charter amendment to go on the November ballot. It started with Councilwoman Melissa Cabello Havrda. Her and I worked closely together to make sure that this made it on the ballot in November. And once we got all 10 council members to agree, the mayor changed his mind. He added it to the ballot, and it passed with 63% of the vote. And so I am very proud to say that this is the first municipal election since 1951 that city workers are able to raise their voice and speak about who they want to see on the dais, who they want to see advocating for their communities. And so, yeah, that was my experience.
Thank you. Mr. Galvan, do you have an example of when it went from activism to a final action?
Yeah, I think a lot about when we first started talking about the 2022 housing bond, right? There was a lot of conversation about the need for affordable housing throughout our city. We knew, of course, during COVID, the experiences people were facing with housing insecurity and the continued issues that before then and then are still here afterwards. But there was a chance there, right, to see how can we make sure that our city is investing in affordable housing that meets the needs for people with extremely tight budgets, but also folks who are just on the edge of facing housing insecurity too, right? And so what I saw a lot of was folks that I knew who were getting involved in making sure that the city was really pushing on expanding affordable housing on every single level, including making sure that we're making investments into our public housing stock, into our deeply affordable housing stock, as well as making sure that these affordable housing pieces were really going to meet the moment. This money was really going to meet the moment. And the way to do that is by going onto the bond committees and making sure that through the city process that we had folks who were advocating for these pieces to get done. It took a lot of vote conversations, a lot of conversations between different bond committee appointments to really discuss what these needs were, why they're needed throughout our city, both within the inner and outer 410 areas as well. And ultimately, those pieces got done. And ultimately, we were able to not only pass or put on the housing bond of $150 million onto the ballot, but then it got passed as well, overwhelmingly in our city. And with that money, we were able to also invest in our public housing stock, our deeply affordable housing stock, to make sure that folks who are on really tight incomes, our seniors, our folks who are disabled, are able to not only afford a place to live here in our city, but live here in dignity too.
Thank you. A quick follow-up on that same topic. As the person in the council seat, you'll have a different relationship to activists than you have had in the past. Activists are often the most idealistic members of a community, but a city council member has to be practical and choose their battles based on political will, opportunity, and balancing other priorities. How do you plan to work with activists when the answer you're giving them isn't the one they want to hear? Mr. Galvan.
Yeah, it's a tough one because it's folks that I've known for a long time, who have worked with together to make sure that we're pushing for things around paid sick leave or other pieces too in our city, making sure our utility rates stay affordable too. And what's going to have to come down to is not only having those tough conversations every now and again, but not clipping our wings either, right? When we think about some of the things that our folks who are maybe most idealistic or are looking for ways to make sure that our working families can really thrive here in our city, I think it's okay to shoot for the moon. But the other part of it is saying, okay, but how do we actually get there, right? How do we actually make sure that we are delivering policy pieces and working through city programming to make sure this works? Or if it doesn't, then we need to identify different solutions to do that. And I think that's some of the things that I've done even as an activist before, of saying, being really critical of the way things are going on the inside and understanding, oh, I see, there are different barriers that are in the way from doing this. It's not that someone doesn't have the will to do it, but there are some other pieces here that we need to get done first before we can get to that next step. It's different. It's incremental. I understand it can be frustrating at times, especially for folks who are experiencing the issue that we're advocating around, but it's also part of the city council process. And being able to work as someone who was on the outside and then was able to work inside and understand that process, go through several budget conversations, go through the bond committees, go through other pieces, gives me the experience to make sure that we are delivering on these pieces, as well as getting the support from other council members who may not always agree, but understand that there is a need in this community that we can strive for together to really solve. And that's the work that I've done.
Same follow-up question for you, Ms. Gonzalez.
So yeah, I've actually been in that position as an advocate where I have been told no, and I still found a way to make it happen. And so I do believe that, like Rick was saying, we can use these voices in the community that are pushing for that change, and include them into the conversation, include them when we're having those discussions, when we're weighing our different options of what is actually feasible, what is actually reasonable for our community, but at the same time pushing that barrier. Because the fact of the matter is, as a city, we have been operating under a deficit for the last 4 years. We were just bailed out by the ARPA funds, who have since run out. And so we are facing some real serious crisis in terms of how are we going to pay for our essential city services. And so, I do believe that activists play a big role Sometimes they can push you to see a way that you didn't see before. They push you to work that much harder. And, the reality of the situation is sometimes the word no, the answer no, is really an opportunity for something else to come through. And so I don't want to discredit that no can often be an opportunity that can lead to a path that has never been walked before, but is very doable, very feasible, and very reasonable.
Thank you. To follow up on that one more time, several of the City Council's more controversial actions in the past few years have bubbled up from the recommendations of activists, including a small abortion travel fund that drew an immediate legal challenge and a proposed, then rescinded resolution calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. A city's jurisdiction ends at its borders, but that doesn't mean a council can't weigh in on issues that happen further from home. Would you support efforts like those that push back on state, national, and even world leaders from your position on the city council? Ms. Gonzalez.
We have to be honest about the fact that laws that have been passed in this country in the past have not always been the correct ones. And so, even with abortion, it took a legal case, a challenging legal case, Roe versus Wade, which happened here in Texas, to overturn that position. And so, I believe that as city council members, we are leaders in our community, and it is up to us as leaders to make sure that we are advocating for our communities and making sure that people are not being harmed by unjust decisions that are being passed down federally or at the state level as well. And so my position on that, yes, is that it is our job as leaders to protect our communities. Sometimes that does mean going against the status quo. Sometimes that does mean going against business as usual. But that's our job, and that's what we sign up for.
Thank you. Mr. Galvan, would you be willing to push back on state, national, even world leaders from your position on the city council?
Yeah, no, I think there are different issues across our city that are impacted by our state and our federal government, and even sometimes international issues too, that impact not only our residents' direct lives, but also impact our larger community as well too. So as a city council person, while it may not be our jurisdiction to really solve those issues or address them fully, I think it is important that our city council still finds ways to make sure that we are advocating for our communities and the impacts that some of those national or state or other decisions impact our communities. When I think about particular things around abortion, right, I think a lot about the sepsis rate increasing here. I think about teen pregnancy increasing here. I think a lot about lack of healthcare access to begin with here in our city, let alone reproductive care access in our community. And with statewide, and then potential nationwide conversations around banning access to abortion services, it is something that we have to take seriously here in our city. Whether or not we act in different ways is something that we can have discussion about at city council, but the biggest piece is making sure that we're not just shrugging our shoulders and saying, oh, well, we'll see what those impacts have and we don't do them to address them here. I think it's been really great to see that the first Reproductive Justice Fund did a lot of really good help for folks in the community beyond just abortion travel access, but really get into the weeds of both the upper and midstream services that really support them, as well as the second one too, to really try to address the downstream services too, which is still legal, right? There are some legal cases around it now that are being challenged with it all, but this is an effort that you have to make to say, let's support our community and make sure that they have that access to healthcare and other pieces that they need too.
Thank you. One of the fastest growing pieces of San Antonio's economy right now is the rise of data centers, many of which are based along Westover Boulevard and Westover Hills. On average, data centers in Texas use about 100 megawatts of power at any given moment. If your eyes glazed over when you heard megawatts, what that means in plain English is that data centers use the same amount of power it would take to power 25,000 homes on a hot summer day. The demand for these energy-intensive facilities is only growing. So the question is, how will you work with the city to continue to entice these businesses to set up shop in District 6? And how will you consider the environmental impacts of their existence? Ms. Gonzalez, will go to you first on that one.
And I think that's a wonderful question. When we're talking about the environmental health, I have actually put out a policy piece on my website, votekellyanne.com, that you can look, that talks about ways that we can have real-time data about what our air quality control is actually looking like in District 6. Because yes, while we do want to expand our economy, while we do want to be open to those businesses, it cannot be at the detriment to the health of our community. And so I think one way that we can continue incentivizing those programs to come is making sure that they are a good fit for our community and for our health. And also the other part of that is making sure that our residents in District 6 have that workforce development to be able to access those jobs. And so I'm very happy that the bond passed with our Alamo Community Colleges because I do see that as being an investment into the future of our city, into the future of our students. And so, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Galvan, same question to you.
Yeah.
Which is how do you entice more businesses like data centers to set up shop in District 6, but also keep in mind the impacts environmentally?
Yeah, it's a tough one that we talked a lot about with different neighbors, especially over there in that part of the district, talking about what used to be the kind of views they had, as well as the connection to nature that they once had, and the concerns about utility rates also going to be increasing with this stuff too, right? Thinking about the amount of power that these things are going to need, and that do need and you require every single day, as well as water usage too, really impacts our city resources to really take care of our folks here throughout our city, not only in District 6, but all throughout our city. And even impacts our further state. National grid, right, or our statewide grid, thinking about the wind and the solar electricity and other parts of electricity coming up from the South Texas all the way up to the north can't get through because we have so many heavy data centers that are taking up some of this power and blocking the literal power from going north to help the rest of our state function. That being said, it's important too that these industries continue to be here in our communities, not only here in San Antonio, but in Texas, because they are supporting multiple pieces of national cybersecurity, of other kinds of industries, not just themselves. What worries me about that, though, is that we cannot just say, okay, great, you can keep coming in, and we'll give you the whole barn along with it, too. My piece that I'm worried about is seeing some of these large data centers that are only employing a few folks that are also taking up a lot of this energy and water usage, and they're taking up a lot of property tax abatements that we're giving them, leaving a lot of our city services to languish, right? Not getting all the full city services because of the corporate subsidies that we give some of these industries, particularly here in District 6. And so my concern is, as if elected council person, is how is this benefiting the larger community? Yes, of course, our local economy, but so too our workers here if we're not employing as many as we think we are, and if we're not addressing the underlying issues of the actual tax subsidies or tax revenue we're going to get from them, if they're all being abated to entice them to come here. We know it's a good spot for them to come. Let them come, let them invest in our communities too, and not just take it all from us.
Thank you. Thank you. We want to try and get to as many questions as we can. Wanted to ask about crime. San Antonio voters say consistently in polls that reducing crime is a top priority. In recent years, the city council has agreed that public safety is a priority, but its members often disagree on how San Antonio should fairly and effectively police its citizens, including the homeless population and the mentally ill. So given the opportunity to address crime through the city budget, which it's already been acknowledged that it will be a tight budget cycle this year, where would you start? Mr. Galvan, you first on this one.
Yeah, no, public safety is a big concern of mine and a big part of my campaign since the beginning of it. It's one of my top 3 issues that we talk about with folks at the doors, talking about a holistic public safety system that includes everyone to make sure that we are really addressing not only the issues at hand, but so too the issues at the root, right? Understanding that, yes, there are going to be pieces of crime and violence that we have to address directly, and we make sure we have the right boots on the ground that can respond quickly and effectively. Having our first responders have the resources that they need to really get those things done is really important. Making sure that they have adequate places to start from, whether that's new fire stations or police stations, to really get to the place they need to go, to have all the materials they need to get there, but also making sure that they have the other pieces too. When our officers, interact with, or even our firefighters interact with them, and our EMS workers too, folks who are experiencing homelessness or folks who are experiencing mental health crises, they aren't always fully equipped with the resources they need to really get them to the service that they may need or to address the full issue there. Well, I think the MIH program is a good way to look at the ways that we can really connect all these pieces together to really have a good, sufficient group of folks going out to these populations, to folks in our community that may be increasing public safety concerns due to their maybe addiction issues or mental health issues and mental health crises that are happening at the moment. It's important that we have the folks that are there to really address the issue, and scaling those programs up is going to be needed, not only to really address them, but to address them in the long term too. And so that's something that I would like to look at the budget, is making sure that we're investing in long-term solutions, not just the right boots on the ground, but the systems that need to be placed in the background too. When we talk about homelessness, one big piece of that, along with addiction issues too, is that there is not enough places for these folks to go to not only get the rehab they need, to get the mental health services they need, and to get the housing they need to stay stable too. If we don't invest in those pieces and we only invest in the Band-Aid solutions, we will never address the full, deep root of the cycles of crime and violence that we see in our communities. And that's what we really have to make sure that we're addressing with our city budget by doubling up on resources.
Thank you. Same question for you, Ms. Gonzalez.
Yeah, and I think that this is a really great question because the fact of the matter is people deserve to feel safe in their homes when they go to sleep at night. And right now, the public perception for many people in District 6 is not. They do not feel safe when they go to sleep at night. And so when we're talking about the fact that we are the fastest growing district, that our city is one of the fastest growing cities, we have to accept the reality that we are going to have to ramp up our police force. But what does that mean exactly? So as a labor organizer for the city union, for the labor union for city employees, I can tell you that some of the people that we had in our union was our call takers and our dispatchers. And currently, right now, 1 in 4 calls to 911 is not getting answered. And that's because we need to make sure that we have the support system in place that ensures that our first responders are able to get home safely each night as well. And so we don't have any more space in our call centers to add more computers. We need more call takers. We need more dispatchers. And the other side of that, too, is we need to take a real hard look at what is happening in our communities. Our young people have been experiencing mental health crises at an alarming rate, especially since COVID, and that is not going down at all. We currently have 4 core officer teams in SAPD. That's barely enough for each single northwest-southeast corridor of the city. We need to make sure that we are investing in those mental health resources because studies have shown that having those core officers, those mental health specialists on site reduces violent incidences by 68%. And so when we're talking about public safety, we also need to have the real conversation about the fact of the matter that our police's relationship to our community has deteriorated over the last few years, and we need to take real solid steps in repairing that relationship so that people know who their safe officers are, so that people feel safe when they go to sleep at night. And also, we need to be honest that there is a sense of personal responsibility that comes along with public safety, of making sure that you're connecting with your neighbors, that you know who your neighbors are, that you are aware if there's a car in your community that is not typically there. And
Please finish your thought.
And so I would also like to make sure that we are investing in our neighborhood watch and our COPS programs as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez, a follow-up for you specifically. You were involved in the 2023 ballot initiative, Proposition A, which was largely about police reform, but 71.6% of San Antonio voters rejected that proposition. And in District 6, the opposition was a little higher than that. Do you plan to continue advocating for such measures as a council member?
So I would like to be very clear about my involvement in Proposition A. In my early 20s, I was in an abusive relationship where having an abortion saved my life. And so when abortion was deemed illegal in Texas, it rang alarm bells for me because I am very aware that that is a life-saving procedure. And so my involvement with Prop A was specifically because of its decriminalization of abortion in the city. And I am very proud of the fact that we were the first city in the South to put abortion on the ballot. Now, there were other parts of that charter amendment because it was a whole package that I do believe were a little bit far-reaching. I do believe were not well thought out. But I defend my stance on that, and I defend my position on making sure that people have access to health procedures that they need to survive. And so the other part of that, of Prop A, was the cite and release program, codifying a cite and release program that we already have here in San Antonio that was actually created by our governor, Rick Perry, who was a Republican himself. And, it did also aim to address our overcrowding in our prisons. Our county jail here in San Antonio has some of the highest rates of deaths of inmates, and that is a reality. That is something that taxpayers have to pay for. So I do look forward to continuing some of the work in that charter amendment, but not all of it. Thank you.
I have a follow-up for Mr. Galvan, similarly a little separate for you, but not that long ago, this district elected Greg Brockhouse, who has been active in conservative politics since leaving office to represent it. You come from a very progressive background. How do you plan to go about connecting with the conservative voters in your district?
Yeah, I think something that's really important for understanding this kind of political partisanship conversation that we often have, particularly with our current election, but generally throughout all of our elections, is that there's a lot of shared values that we still have with one another, especially folks that are in kind of similar neighborhoods that we're all seeking to, or both of us are seeking to represent, right? These are folks who, a lot of them came from the inner west side and moved further and further out west and have a lot of connections to one another in one form or another. This is the neighborhoods that I grew up in. I grew up in the Harper's Meadow neighborhood, serving as a neighborhood association president there currently. I served on the board previously. Those conversations we've had with one another haven't always been on the same page, right? And so it's understanding ways that we can work together to really address these issues, issue by issue, addressing these things in our neighborhood that really are going to benefit all of us, and not just kind of say, this is my pet project, this is your pet project. Understanding that we have to work together to really address the underlying issues that we're addressing in our community, whether that's things around safety, around street safety, around loose dogs in our neighborhoods, and advocating for our parks together too. There's a lot of things that we can agree on, no matter your political leanings, that our city needs to invest in, whether it's better streets or other pieces too. And so the conversations at the doors have been about those pieces and being honest with each other and saying, hey, look, you may vote one way and I vote another way. You may believe this and believe in something else. But that's why I'm really proud to be endorsed by some of our former opponents in this race, Vanessa Chavez and Los Angeles Picasso, who had different political views than myself. Because I have the ability to work with everybody in our district and make sure that we are fighting for a common cause together and not just fighting for things that one of us believes in or another one believes in.
Thank you. Outgoing Councilwoman Cabello Havrda was the chair of the city's Public Safety Committee, but the police and fire unions have not made an endorsement in this race. So I'm asking you both, have you had meetings with either of those groups? And do you feel like you have a solid understanding of what the police and fire unions want to see from a District 6 council person? I'll go first to Ms. Gonzalez.
Sure. I have had conversations with both groups. I actually served last year on the Central Labor Council with our firefighters. And so I understand the concerns that our first responders have, and I understand the constraints that they sometimes feel when we're talking about our city budget process, when we're talking about, where do we invest in our city. So yes, I have had conversations with them. I feel like I can have a very good working relationship with both of those groups. And I think ultimately our goal is the same. We want to make sure that they are able, you don't always need 911, you don't always need fire, you don't always need police, but when you do, you want to make sure that they are able to respond quickly, that they are able to get there, and that they have the things that they need to protect us. So yes.
Thanks. Same to you. Do you feel like you understand what the police and fire unions are looking for in a District 6 council person?
Yeah, so I also had conversations with both associations, and we had really good conversations and frank ones too about the needs that both of their organizations need and both of the departments really need, and some of the conversations that have been happening at City Council that haven't always been fully transparent in making sure that these pieces were being addressed, whether it's issues on staffing, quality collective bargaining agreements, or even just great communication between council members and some of the leaders within the association themselves. And so making sure that our council office is open to talking with both of them and has an open ear is really important to me. It's the same way I feel with public education and other labor unions too throughout our city, is making sure that we have folks on staff who are the point people to talk with these folks. That way, if there's some reason I'm not able to answer the call, our staff is always up to date on what's going on, especially as we go moving into these budget processes. Whether either of us get elected, we are going to have to face these extreme budget deficits, and understanding too that the police collective bargaining agreement is coming up, and that the fire department still also needs support too. And so identifying ways that we can work together with the association who have the actual boots on the ground is really important to make sure that we are actually addressing the needs of both departments that largely address the needs of our public safety system here as a whole. And so that's why I'm really proud to be endorsed by the AFL-CIO, the Central Labor Council, because of that commitment and that working relationship that I have with labor unions across our city. And so I'll be committed to making sure that we continue to work together, if elected, with both the Fire Association and the Police Association, so we can actively work together to achieve public safety in our communities.
Thank you. Quickly, I want to ask, Culebra Road, which runs through District 6, is considered one of the most dangerous roads in San Antonio. There's a bond project in the works to fix some of that, but it doesn't start till this fall, and it's a small portion that's really more in District 5 and District 7. But that's just one of many infrastructure issues in the district. So how do you plan to advocate for safer streets in your district? And either one of you can jump in on that.
I can jump in. Transportation is a big piece, a big important issue to me. Someone who relied on the bus for most of my life before I had a car, whether it was going to school or going to work, or even going to school in Austin and back home throughout breaks, I relied largely on public transportation to get across the city, both here and in Austin. And so a lot of that exposed me to just how it is experiencing life as a pedestrian, life as a cyclist, life as a bus rider, and how you can walk on like, these dangerous roads, and living along Culebra Road myself during the summertime, trying to figure out when my family My mom was at work, my brother was at work, and it was me by myself, and making sure that I had the needs that I needed to get to was having to walk along Calabria Road and figure out how to get to where I needed to go. So that's the reality for a lot of folks today, and a reality that we continue to experience throughout our city, including beyond District 6, like you mentioned. And so what we have to make sure is that we are working with TxDOT and all the other partners within the Metropolitan Planning Organization to really address Calabria Road, because there is so many differences within Calabria Road itself. That's not all city-owned, it's also state-owned. And so it also has different pieces that are connected to other state-owned roads. And so working at ways that we can connect with TxDOT to really address these issues is why I was really happy to be able to work together with Councilmember Castillo while she was working, or while she was serving on the AMPO transportation improvement portion of the AMPO. Understand that we need to work with our county leaders and our other folks in our city and our state to really address these issues of making our streets safer, and also creating ways for our city streets to be safer, to reach Calabria Road and create that demand and that need to make our streets safer too, or our main road be safer.
Thank you. Same question.
Yeah, so there was money allocated in the 2022 bond for Culebra Road, but that was inside 410, which largely does not cover District 6. And so one thing that I am looking forward to and advocating in the 2027 bond is making sure that we are setting aside money to make sure that Culebra Road from 1604 to 410 is also addressed. And when we're talking about the reasons why that corridor is one of the most dangerous corridors in our city, it's because Culebra started as a 2-lane road. It was never meant to be this large thoroughfare that it is now. And 4-way intersections are some of the highest, are places where some of the highest rates of accidents happen. And so we need to make sure that we are investing into making that part of our city, of our corridor in District 6 safe, but at the same time, making sure that we are including our small businesses into that conversation, because a majority of our small businesses are actually located on Culebra Road between 1604 and 410. So I think, I think it would be terrible to see what happened on St. Mary's happen on Culebra. And so while we are making that investment, while we are making that part of our district safer, we need to make sure that we are having conversations with our communities, having conversations with our small businesses, and making sure that all of the stakeholders in improving that safety are a part of that conversation. And as someone who has a small business of my own, as somebody who comes from a family of small business owners, I understand oftentimes the thin profit margins that our small businesses operate under, but the service that they provide to our community.
Thank you. To follow up on that briefly, you mentioned inside the freeway and outside the freeway on Culebra Road. Can you speak a little bit to how you make sure limited funding for things like infrastructure improvements don't just go to the more affluent or growing parts of your district versus the parts that are more inner city and maybe need more investment as well?
Yeah, and the reality of that is that I live on Marbach and Military. I travel that road every single day. I see the safety concerns, not just with infrastructure, but also when we're talking about drainage needs, sidewalk needs. We have to remember that every single transit experience is also a pedestrian experience as well. And so we need to make sure, I guess one way that we can advocate for that, right, is to fight for that investment in all parts of the district. And, I've been knocking on doors for the last 5 months, and somebody told me once that you can always tell what part of the district the city council member lives on because it's always the nicest part of the district. And I was like, well, let me tell you, I am on Marbach and Military, so if in the next 4 years you see Marbach and Military be the nicest part of District 6, then I will believe you.
Thanks. Same question. How do you equally apply funding to different parts of the district?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I think one of the key ways that we do that citywide is a couple different ways. One is that we do it with the equity budgeting lens that we have currently in place. And so making sure that that continues to stay in place so that we can have more infrastructure investments into the communities that have long been neglected, into communities that were not master planned, and into communities that have been overlooked for the majority of our city's development, and that we don't leave any neighborhoods behind. That's going to be one big way that we continue to make sure that our city budgeting continues to go that direction. But beyond that, it's also looking at our bond committees, right? Making sure we're appointing folks from those communities who can really get these things done and know the impacts of not having sidewalks, know the impacts of not having drainage needs met, know the impacts of having unsafe streets in their neighborhoods, but also working together, right? That's the same thing with working with people with different political leanings, is understanding that this entire district is one big community. And so working together with folks who may not always understand, why are we focusing on this area when I also have a pothole in the area? Is understanding that, well, take a look and let's see together. You may have one pothole. These folks don't have sidewalks at all and have potholes. So let's make sure that we're working on these pieces together with our NAMP funding too, with our city council budget to really stretch all the pieces that we can and use every single lever that we can and work together with all of our departments that address these issues, planning, public works, transportation, and the others as well, to really look at this holistically.
Thank you. This has flown by. I really only have time for one more question before we get to the closing statements. District 6 has one of the highest concentrations of military retirees and veterans in San Antonio. Many of these service members live in the neighborhoods north of Lackland Air Force Base and on the northwest side. There's also a Veterans Affairs outpatient clinic in District 6. Still, many veterans and military families report issues finding affordable housing and childcare across the city, and they're not immune to citywide issues of food insecurity. Some face challenges related to their mental and physical health. So where would you start in terms of trying to solve for some of these issues within the veteran community? We'll start with Mr. Galvan.
Yeah. It's an absolute shame that in Military City, USA, that we continue to see folks who are serving or who did serve, or even their families are experiencing issues of poverty, of food insecurity, or barriers to education, healthcare access too. I've seen this firsthand with my father, he's a veteran himself, and, there's different issues that he had before different national legislation was done to honor more the honorably discharged folks. Dishonorably discharged folks to access the benefits that they also worked hard for. And so some of those pieces means working with our national and our state leaders to really address the issues that impact, again, our folks here in our city. Even when it's outside of our bounds a little bit, we know that the laws that they make at the state level, some of the systems they create at the state level and at the national level too, are going to impact our folks, especially when it comes to our veterans, their families, and our active military too. So that's one of the first things that I want to do. Beyond that, it's looking at ways that we can have supplementary services with our city to meet the needs for housing vouchers to really be approved, making sure that we have mental health services available, and working with our GI forums and our VFW halls too, to really meet not only their needs, but their folks' needs too that come to those places.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Yeah, so I am very proud that my treasurer, Jesse Garcia, is a veteran himself. And I have also been endorsed by the two veterans in our race, which was Carlos Antonio and Bobby Herrera. And the reason that I earned their endorsement is because I understand the sacrifices that these families have made for our community and how important it is to honor them and to make sure, as Rick said, that they are not being denied their housing vouchers in our city, which a lot of them currently are. We have 66 veterans in San Antonio that have a housing voucher in their hands and are still currently not able to find housing. And, calling ourselves Military City USA, that is a disgrace. And that is something that needs to be addressed. I also do see an opportunity with the VA hospital right there on 151 to build housing for our veterans in the district because, yes, my community, which is right north of Lackland, has a lot of retired veterans. But for so many of them, their houses have outgrown them. Their families are gone. They're living by themselves or with their partner in a home. And, there's an opportunity there to bring young families into the community while still providing our veterans dignity housing that is close by to the VA, close by to transit so that they can get around our city. And I think, it comes back to listening. We need to listen to our veteran community and not speak for them, but speak with them and advocate for their needs.
Thank you so much. We did a coin flip before we got started, so we'll have Ms. Gonzalez go first on the closing statement.
Thank you. Look, being underestimated is nothing new for me or for District 6. I was told that my family didn't look the part, didn't have the education, didn't speak the right language. Our existence has always been questioned when we succeed. So yes, several people are surprised that Kellyanne Gonzalez has made it this far, that I've built a people-powered campaign, led with vision, grit, and that I have outworked every single one of my opponents at every single turn. But this is who we are, District 6. We are fighters. We are survivors. We are builders of something better, of a more prosperous future. District 6 has one real choice in this race: a true working class champion with the lived experience to advocate for the forgotten, for those of us who are left behind, for those of us who have never had a level playing field. I have been counted out before. So has this district, and every single time we have proven them wrong. This is not just my story. This is our story. And so I invite you to go to votekellyanne.com to learn how you can make sure that we are electing the right leader for District 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Galvan, your closing statement.
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone here who came to attend and hear this important conversation. And thank you again to our host here who made sure this conversation happened. My name is Rick Galvan, and I am running for City Council District 6 because District 6 is my home. I'm really proud that because of my experience working at City Council and delivering for residents that I have the endorsements of each of the neighboring council members around District 6 because they are trusting and confident in me that we can work together to deliver for our shared Westside communities. I am proud that because of my commitment to advocating for all of our folks in the district that I'm endorsed by some of our former opponents, Vanessa Chavez and Los Angeles Picasso, as well as my commitment to public safety and public education that are endorsed by our constable in the area, Bexar County Constable Leticia Vasquez, as well as our 3 school board members from both Northside ISD and Edgewood ISD. And also because of my commitment to fighting for working families every step of the way, like my own, I am also proud to be endorsed by many labor unions across our city, including the AFL-CIO, including the Northside AFT, including the City Employees Union, AFSCME Local 2021. And I believe that together, we can make sure that all of our folks feel safe here at home, they are able to afford to live here in our city that they have built, and that we are able to feel proud of our neighborhoods as we continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you.